All right, welcome back to another episode of XYZ. We've been away a while for some personal stuff, but here we are back again to talk about phones this time. So if you remember those old landlines, maybe some of you don't already, but kind of the transition from how we used to use phones to how we use phones today, and really maybe how we don't even really use phones really the way they were originally intended at all anymore. Through how people really communicate through them, the decline of phone calls, all the privacy and security concerns around the way we use them through texting and messaging and all the social media and stuff. So, anyway, I'm not going to spoil it. You're going to just have to listen to the entire episode. So, here we go. All right. So, Almeen, I'm going to hit you up with first question. Did you in your household ever have a landline phone, and what kind of phone was it?
Yeah, it was okay. So yes, we did. It was I'm trying to remember, if people who lived in like Des Moines in like the early thousands. It was like the one that like MediaCom gave you, and they would like come in and attach it, or Quest. I think they had like a branded. It was like branded, but we had like the phone cable TV package, and we had two of those phones, one upstairs, one downstairs, and it was like it was just normal like dial pad, but it had like the long cord with it. And I remember you could like where it was placed, you could take it on the wall and you could like walk all the way to like the edge of the kitchen. So it was pretty long. And I do also remember like the whole thing like spying on like who my sister's listening to because yeah, later we got like a wireless one and that was still like the same deal. Like I could pick up the downstairs one, I could hear what she was talking about. But yeah, we upgraded to sort of like a very like fake metal silverly. Still remember like pretty vividly, like early 2000s VCR type looking stuff.
Did you ever have any of the rotary ones ever, or is that
No,
beyond?
my aunt did,
Okay.
and especially some of my people, my family in New York, who've been in the states for a lot longer. They had it.
Yeah, I my experience, yeah, we had a couple cord ones. I actually remember like being like 6 years old and being like, I wonder what happens if I cut this thing, and I cut it and I got really in trouble.
Boy,
But yeah, I
wow.
remember the wireless thing was awesome. Yeah, that was a huge jump in technology. I actually it's totally like funny because like when I was like 18 years old, and I was like moving into my own place for the very first time, like one of like my life goals was to like own a phone. It's like, "Oh, I got my own phone." Like that's
I
the
remember
sign.
that, but it sounds like, I mean, that phone that you got from Quest or Mediacom, whatever, that you guys use it quite a bit, right? I mean, that was, as you said, early 2000s, so you guys didn't really have a cell phone
Yeah,
at
so
that point?
I was born in '02. And I think my parents were the first ones to get like some Android smartphones. They had cell phones before. Like my mom had a BlackBerry. My dad just had a like a heavy duty one. Those like huge IKEA type deals. And then they were the first to get some like crappy like Android smartphone. That's like when I like would say I became conscious. I realized that they had those. And my first phone I had in third grade is my sister's hand me down, and it was super basic. It's literally one of those like butterfly phones. It was like hot pink, and I had that for a while. And I was always so embarrassed to like bring it out because it was hot pink. I remember this one time, my sister was the manager of the boys soccer team in high school. So she was the one who like drove me from school and stuff. So when I was at one of their meetings, it dropped out of my pocket, and people were like, "Whose phone's that?" And I was too scared to say anything because I was like, "No, I'm so embarrassed." That's like one of
Not
the top
mine.
10 most embarrassing moments of my life.
Did you eventually have to like own up to it, like, or did you just leave it there until it was, no one was around?
Yeah, my sister was like, "Hey, that's your phone." I'm like, "Oh, really? Oh." Yeah.
So you said that was your hand-me-down. She gave that to you, but what kind of plan did you have, or how'd you get your minutes
Mm.
on that then? Or did you?
I
Was it
think
just
we
a
had like
toy?
I think we had unlimited calling on when we had like the landline stuff. I don't know because I never really used it. I know my
Okay.
parents. What some people don't know. My parents are from Bosnia. They were here. They came as refugees in the '90s. They would also buy something card or if it was some minutes or to talk to people in Bosnia. I remember like that. It's like, okay, you have to like talk kind of fast. I'm like, okay, hi, Grandma, how you doing? And she can't understand what I'm saying because I'm a little kid. I can't even speak like proficient Bosnian to her.
Oh, that's so funny. I remember on that same vein, I remember there being like a commercial. I don't know which phone company what it was, but they were kind of advertising that, and it was like um something about like Jen had a boy. Jen had a baby. It's a boy, and they were trying to like advertise how much it costed, and so they were just leaving a voicemail, which was free, and it was like trying to fit the entire conversation in a voicemail as part of the ad. It was really fun.
Dope, Ben. I want to know this. Okay, it is a pain in the butt to schedule stuff with my friends in group chats, and I have all the social media like tools in my world, like in the world. How did you guys like organize stuff? Like when you started having cell phones, was it like a giant group message, or was it an email chain, or was it like what was it?
We still had to like call each other. So like up until I didn't have a cell phone until I was 15, and that was really like I mean, it couldn't even text. I don't even think texting was really a thing like in 2005 ish. I don't know. Maybe Chris, you would know better, but yeah, it was really just phone. Like I remember spending hours on the phone all the time with my girlfriend at the time and stuff, and so that was basically how we coordinated. It was all very in person still too.
Hmm.
So that was it.
Yeah, I agree with that. So about what year did you say that was? You said you
That
were
was
15.
2005 when
Yeah.
I think I got my first one.
Yeah, I think I didn't get my first one until 2003 or 4. And it was very basically the flip phone, and where you had the T9 or whatever it was texting. But it was such a hassle to text. It was just we were just calling on the phone. That was pretty much how we did everything. But
Yeah, and it was wild how you know it was no problem to like pick up the phone even then. Like I felt like I know in a previous episode I was like terrified of talking on the phone, but it was really like to adults, but like to other people my age, it was like not really that big of a deal to talk on the phone at all. Yeah, it's kind of funny because all of the kind of the ways like all of the annoyances of like how phones were back in the day have gone away, and like they've just sort of like morphed. Like I think of like things like advertisers calling you, like those types like that, your phone would just like ring like all the time for like
hmm.
random shit. And it was like
Right.
people trying to sell you stuff over the phone,
Yeah.
Mhm.
and like
Mhm.
none of that exists anymore. But now we have all these other annoyances, with like all the
Mm.
advertising, you know, everywhere.
Mm.
Yeah, that's coming back to me because before we had a do not call registry and all that stuff. Well, and a lot of the like political calls I think don't fall into that. But I remember, like you said, it would ring all the time, and it would just be. And we didn't have caller ID, of course. When I first started using the phone, there was nobody'd heard of caller ID. It didn't exist, so you had no idea who was on the other end. So you're like, "Oh, this might be an important call. This might be a real, my girlfriend or whatever." And so you have to pick up the phone, and then it's like, "Hey, sir, would you like to buy 3 years worth of magazines or whatever?" Like, nope, slam. It was continual, like you said.
Oh, I can't even imagine like if you apply to a bunch of jobs or something and it was like that now. Just like every time the
Yeah,
phone rings, your just heart just drops. Is this the call? It's like, no, I don't want to buy this. And you just hang
Yeah.
up.
yeah. Well, so what we did, I remember when I started to apply for jobs like that, I got one of the first answering machines. Like nobody had an answering machine at that time, and that's how I would kind of screen the calls. And so then I'd listen, and as soon as it would say like, "Hey, I'm so and so from whatever company," then I'd be like pick up, and I'd be like, "Oh, I'm here, I'm here."
What year was that?
Well, this was 1988, something like that. And I said first answering machine. I mean, like I'm sure answering machines were in the 70s, but no regular people didn't have those. you know,
You were a
I was
techie for having an answering machine.
yeah, yeah, I mean, you really were, and people are like, "Why did you spend money on that thing?" But yeah, 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 but that's crazy. And is it time for me to go on the back in my day old man thing?
Yes, this is the
Yes.
best section of the show.
Yes.
So okay,
It's my favorite
all
portion.
right, here you go. I was trying to hold out and make sure you guys get your. Okay, so when we first when I was a teenager, we lived in the country. Now this isn't like true for all Gen X or whatever. I just want to give that disclaimer. This was because I was in rural Iowa mostly, but they didn't, phone wire was expensive, whatever. The equipment was expensive. So when you lived out in rural Iowa, everybody was on a party line still, like in the early 80s when I was a teen, started using the phone. So what that meant was, like, I mean, you mentioned like you could listen into your sister's conversations. I could listen into all the neighbors' conversations. So, well, so when you pick back in the old days, when you picked up a phone, you expected to hear a dial tone. You guys know
Mhm.
what a dial tone is, right? But where I was on the party line, you picked up the phone and you either A, got a dial tone, which meant you were good to call out, or you heard your neighbors talking because you were all sharing the line. So you could, if you were really careful with the receiver, you could pick it, because I knew there were some teen girls down the street that they got on the call and they gossiped right after school. So I knew that if I would catch them, and I was really quiet lifting up the receiver. Like, I'd pick up the phone, I'd still have my finger on the button, and I'd really slowly let go of it, and I'd listen in and cover the mouthpiece, and I could hear what they were talking about, all the gossip.
Do you remember anything?
It was just stupid teenage things about who they were kissing or who they want, I don't know, that kind of stuff. But, um,
Would like the receiver like make a noise or something? Like,
well, if you weren't careful, I mean, yeah, if you picked up, it would do like a, like that kind of sound. But there was enough static on the lines and stuff that, if I was quiet enough, and it depended on which phone too, because somebody gave me a free phone later, and that thing was not stealthy, and I couldn't use that one. And then they would catch you after a while. They'd realize something's going on there, and they'd be like, "Hey, you little creep," and then you'd have to hang up. But yeah, so that was the thing. Now back in like my grandmother's time, she talked about it was like that with the party line for everybody. And not only that, but like when I when I was using the phone in the 80s, that uh it would, if the phone rang at your house, it was for you. Right? That if it rang, it was for you. It was only on calling out that really was the problem. Or if you were on a phone call, your neighbors could hear you, obviously, too. But like when my grandmother was growing up, she talked about on the party line that you had to listen for a series of rings. You knew that yours was three dots and a dash or whatever. Oh, if I hear three dots and a dash, that's my ring, and I should pick up the phone. That's kind of wild, isn't it?
yeah. Was that back when like it was when people would dial, they'd actually get like a person that would then route it? Is
Uh
that kind of
huh.
why that was?
I think the reason I understood that it's like that is because the infrastructure, the equipment was just really expensive. Because I mean, we're probably talking copper wire. I don't know how much it was back then, but and so they couldn't wire like everybody a separate. Like, not everybody had a separate cable from the station wherever to your home. So it's like everybody was along the same wire, and you were just kind of stringing off that wire.
I see.
But yes, in my grandmother's day, yes, you did pick up the phone, and if you wanted, you would ask for Beechwood 1875 or whatever, and get connected to somebody. So yeah, but back to your question about rotary, we only had the rotary ones when I first started. So yeah, that was interesting. So you stick your finger in the little finger holes, and there's one for each number, and you let the dial spin, and it makes a series of clicks that corresponds to the number. So
Yeah,
yeah.
speaking of the number, like I remember I don't know, even to this day, like the whole area code, like there's all these like little like tricks, to
Mhm,
either dialing inside your area code or dialing outside of it,
mhm.
and then there's complexity of like, well, if you were dialing out into another area code, but then you had to dial into someone's like company line, it's just like all these like weird shit.
There
I don't
was,
know if I
yeah,
like just never, I don't know. I was just too much of a kid to like really get it, but I just remember being like, because like if you dialed into your own area code, you did not have to put the area code. So then you could just do like the 7 digits. And
right.
then but like I lived on like the edge of my area code, and then like all my friends at school lived in a different area code, and like they'd like be like, you know, they'd give me their number and it would just be like the first 7 digits. And then I'd like try to call it and it would be like some random person, or
You
like
got
they
someone
just
in your
never,
area code.
yeah, right. And it was just like, what? Like, it was just so confusing. And then
Yeah.
because we lived on the edge, like, and my parents split up, and then like my dad was in one area code, my mom was in the other one, and it was just like, it was so confusing. Like, when do I
Yeah.
dial 515 and when do I dial 319? And like, it was just, it was awful.
Yeah. It could be confusing. Now, when I've back in the 80s, Iowa only had 3 area codes, so it was a little less confusing because it's almost like if you took the state of Iowa and you made, like, Neapolitan ice cream, you divide it into thirds
Hmm.
vertically, that's where it was. So it was pretty much everybody I knew was in the 515 area code, so it was a lot easier than I think. But I do remember, I could be wrong about this, but I think that within the 7 well, I think okay, so I do know that even if they were within your area code in the 80s, if it was not in your town, so, like, Melcher, Dallas, where I was, the first 3 of your the town prefix or whatever was 947, right? So it was 515 947. If you dialed anywhere but 947, it was long distance, and you got charged. So that was a huge deal. So, like, if I was talking to somebody that was at 898 or whatever, my parents would get a bill, and they were very angry if they had to spend $10 on Chris's phone call, So that was, but that was confusing. It's kind of, it was like, what am I calling long distance? Am I not? And it was interesting. I talked to Christy, and she said that where she grew up, it was she didn't even have to dial 7. She was in a very small town for a while before she moved to Spencer, and it was either the 3 or 4 digit extension number. It was like they're all at a
Wow.
company and you had an extension. So but I mean, how do you remember all those rules? It's like depending on where you are, it's like the phone company has their own rules or something, depending on the town and the company.
Right.
It's crazy.
I mean, did you ever have to deal with long distance?
Literally only when I would talk about like family in Bosnia, and then I do remember we went. This is when I had the Android. My first smartphone was like some really bad Android. When we went over to Bosnia, my mom's like, "Do not turn on the celery service. Do not turn on roaming. You're only going to use Wi-Fi." And then I realized like, oh, I can't really do international calls. But then she would call my dad because she would like buy a SIM over there.
Yeah, being on like that edge of, I think we were on the edge of like 319 once that like split. Like, I remember my mom yelling at us all the time, Jim and I, like, "Hey, don't call any of your friends because like that's long distance," because it was like literally cross area codes, and it was like
Hmm.
literally don't talk to anybody. And kind of to your point, Chris, on the anyone being able to listen in. I remember like in fourth grade, I had a girlfriend, as fourth graders would, not really a girlfriend, but I remember like calling her house and like, you know, kind of like Elmine said too, like anyone could just like pick up, like, because you don't know who it is. And so like
Hmm.
I'd call her house and it would be like her brother, and her brother would just be like, screw you, man, and just like literally hang up on you, and it's
Hmm.
like, that's it. Like, that's the end of the conversation. Or like, the mom would be like, she'd just sigh and just be like, not now, and just like, like hang up, and like, you don't, that's it. End of conversation. No chance. Like, try again, later in the week. It was like totally like, you have no idea really like who's going to be on the other side.
Yeah.
It could be anyone in the family could just interrupt.
Yeah. Kind of an interesting side story on that I once I was like 16, I picked up the phone once at home. It's probably like 1983, 4, and it's my uncle, and he starts asking me questions, and he's talking about, well, can I pull up my truck out there, and can we load the lawnmower or whatever? And I'm like, yeah, I guess we can do all that. And I'm just like, why is he asking me all these questions? And at the very end of the conversation, he said, okay, well, thanks, Joe. He thought the entire time he was talking to my dad, but since it wasn't my phone, it was the family's phone. So yeah, but you get into a lot of interesting things like that. You never know who might pick up, and even though you think you might know who you're talking to, you might not. It was crazy. Yeah. But yeah,
Do you guys?
dating, I was gonna say dating for sure was, very challenging. I think I lost at least 2 girlfriends in my early teens because I really couldn't talk on the phone because my parents didn't like us talking on the phone, and when we did, there was no privacy. It's like you were right out there in the middle of the kitchen because that's where the phone was. And
Right.
they
Yeah,
like
you'd have to like hunker down and like,
yeah,
cup your mouth and be like, you know, I love you. Good night.
yeah, I know, and the whole time your parents are just watching you, and like, "Well, hello? Can I get some privacy?" No, but anyway, sorry, I mean, what were you saying?
I was gonna say, do you guys remember the launch of the iPhone?
I do, vaguely.
I was too poor to like care about such things, but I my oldest brother did get one and I was like, "Wow, that's cool." But I didn't like really get it cuz I never like used a smartphone. I didn't really like okay, cool. If I can call on this thing with the screen. Neat.
Yeah, I kinda remember thinking the same thing, and then I had some friends who had one maybe it was the iPhone 2 at that point, and, 2 or 3, I don't know, whatever, and I was like, "Okay, I can kinda see how somebody might think this is cool," but still wasn't 100% sold, and like you said, I was poor, so I definitely wasn't even thinking about buying that at that point.
Yeah, I got my very first like smartphone. So I had like a really dumb phone and it was my first one and like Chris said it was just like a flip phone. I mean that thing was like durable as hell compared
Mhm.
to
Oh, yeah.
that thing, all the Nokia jokes and whatnot were totally true, but yeah, my first one was like this it was an LG Bliss and it was like this really like campy yucky green. Almost looked like a barf green type of it was really gross color, but I mean, the apps were, it was a complete iPhone knockoff. The apps were complete garbage. And I was just like, well, these are dumb. And then I remember, so the iPhone came out and didn't really get it, but I remember like the Droid coming out, like the original Droid. And like, I mean, I don't know if you guys remember, but it would literally go like Droid, whenever you got like a text message or something.
I
My
didn't
God,
know
yeah,
that.
yeah, 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 yeah,
And
yeah.
like that thing was like a status symbol for a hot minute. You would hear that and be like, wow, that person is super high tech and awesome and whatever. Maybe it was just me, but like I felt like a lot of the people I knew, like at the time, were like, man, those droids are so cool. And like I got one, I got the Droid 2, and I was like, so cool. It says droid whenever I get a notification. And then like I realized like you could get on the internet on those things, and that was it. It was like, you know, all of a sudden going to the bathroom was, not boring anymore. I was not trying to just get out of there, right? Like sitting down and taking a poop was like actually entertaining. You're not just trying to get out of there, right?
I don't remember when droids really became a thing. I think maybe the people I hung out with were more iPhone people, maybe more Apple people. I don't remember that.
It was
I
like
do remember
2010. 2010,
okay.
I remember.
Yeah, I think I must have been surrounded by Apple people at the time. But you guys will laugh when you hear the first smartphone I had. It was a Palm Pre. Do you guys remember that?
A Palm 3?
Pre, like PRE. They also had a Palm Pixie, but the Pre had
Oh,
it had like a sliding keyboard. Um it was touchscreen, but you could slide the bottom of it out and use the keypad there. And I actually loved it, to be honest. There are a lot of things I liked it, but when I did finally get an iPhone after that, I was a little disappointed, to be honest, because I it had WebOS, which I think WebOS kind of died because HP bought Palm and all that stuff, and it kind of went just kind of kaput. But WebOS did survive on it. If you've ever seen an LG TV, um, it's running WebOS, so it's like running. I don't think I like how it works now for TVs, but anyway. But yeah, I actually liked that Palm Pre a lot, but the company just went under pretty much. So you didn't see anything of them after that. They stopped upgrading the OS and everything. But anyway,
Dude,
so that was my
my wife swears by those keyboards still. She's like, I am still waiting for them to return to the keyboards. She's like, you
uh,
could just type so fast and like do anything on those so fast.
well. Now that's interesting. Sorry if I cut you off, Elmine, but
no, okay, I'm just laughing.
I will find this article that I read last week where they say that manufacturers are bringing mechanical buttons back. I don't know about phones, but they're starting to bring them back. Like you look now, even like cars and everything, like everything's gone touchscreen, right? Well, now I guess they're reversing that trend and starting to bring physical buttons back to everything. So we'll see if they do that on phones. I doubt it.
I just sent the. I had this one for like maybe a year before I got the Android, but after the pink phone. Now this one was really cool because it was bright blue. It's called the LG Optimus F3Q, and I remember it because it had those like orange buttons next to the blue buttons because you had to do like shift to get the different keys. And that one had some like apps on it, and it was kind of cool. I got the multicolored like block break game where you like bounce up and down with you try to break all the bricks.
It's it's wild, like these phones like this, like, speaking of the bathroom not becoming so boring, like now, like I just don't know what I did with all of my time before, like how I filled all my time. Like, and maybe that's like a bad thing now. It's like I fill it with my phone now, like every small thing, It's like, what did I do before in the bathroom? When I was just sitting there, and like, did I think about stuff? I don't know. It was like the first 20 years of my life, and it's like, it's like now, once I got that droid, it's like now I know exactly which maybe is bad.
Yeah, I don't. Yeah, I can't remember either. What was life? What was the bathroom experience like before smartphones? I don't remember.
I mean, but like, not even that. Just like I'm standing in line. I'm looking
Yeah,
at my
yeah, yeah,
phone,
yeah.
right? Like
For
any
sure.
any
Yeah.
sort of like mundane queuing or waiting or just
Mm-hmm.
anything is like people got their phone out now. I don't know. I guess maybe people talked in line and stuff before. I don't know. Maybe everyone just stood around awkwardly instead of looking at their phones. They just
I
kind of.
think. Yeah, I think two things you said there. I think there was a lot more interacting with strangers, probably depending on what kind of personality you are. But yeah, it was just a lot of awkward standing around and just looking around, waiting in line. Yeah, lots more boring. Lots more. Do you remember what the plans were like when you first got your cell phone? I remember being scared to death to buy my first cell phone because people kept talking about the big contracts you had to sign and how you were locked in for so many years and blah blah blah. They're not like that anymore, but um,
Oh yeah,
I don't know if
now with like Ryan Reynolds, like Mint and like Cricket and stuff, you can just like it's like Netflix, it's super cheap now.
yeah. But yeah, when I first bought my first cell phone, I'm pretty sure it was like I had to sign a big contract and commit to so many years on it. I don't remember all the details, but
Yeah, I remember it being very much an event.
yes.
There's all this weight to it. It's like I'm in a contract. Like, this is a big deal,
Hmm.
and then it was like, yeah, unlimited calls and texts was like, oh my god, I can text
Hmm.
unlimited. Like holy cow, no long distance. And yeah, and just the on that same thing, kind of the cell phones being like a separate plan, like really opened up, just kind of dissolved problems, like, kind of walking back a few years, like the whole internet thing, right? Like long distance worked also for the internet. Everything on the internet was long distance.
Hmm.
And so, getting on the internet was like, there's $1,000 internet bill right there, like
Right.
for a single day of being on the internet, and today it's like, you don't even think about everything's so interconnected. You don't even think about any of that type of stuff anymore.
Right. But you're right. I mean, I think when I first started using AOL, maybe they had an 800 number or something, or some a bank of them to use. But if the 800 numbers were all being used, you couldn't dial into them, then you ended up dialing long distance. But like early on, even before AOL, I remember if you wanted to get on a bulletin board or something like that, some kind of chat system, you had to dial in long distance. Yeah.
Yeah, it's weird how, like, I just kind of had this thought. It's maybe so, like, getting on the internet, getting on the computer used to be like such like an exciting thing. Like I remember like getting home, like I was super into MMOs when I was, 9, 10, whatever, super into video games. And like I would like be entirely disconnected the entire day, and then I'd come home and like literally chuck my book bag, just like like yeet it across the house, like do not care. We're getting on the computer. It was basically like hyped all day, to connect to the internet, and
Yeah, that was such a good
do
feeling.
yeah, and like now it's like I'm so connected all the time, and same with like, oh, I get to like chat with my friends, like back in the AOL days, because, again, that privacy thing where, your parents, you're like telling your girlfriend, I love you. And like, they're just sitting there, standing there. And then like all of us moved to AOL and MSN and stuff to, to be able to gain that privacy back. But it was like this huge, like rise up every day, like this huge event, getting home and being able to like connect again. And then like with smartphones, it's like all the time now. And it's, I don't know, not to get too dark, but it's just like kind of like ruin the experience a bit too. And now it's like, if you're not on, like, if you're not part of it, then like, then you like just fall behind, and
Right.
maybe behind's the wrong word, but just like, like everyone else is still doing stuff, is still on the internet without you, and
Hmm.
there's really no way to like everyone get off, everyone go touch grass, right?
Yeah, that feeling of like coming home and just throwing your backpack for me was like hopping on my PS3, turning it on, and like just hoping the people I like played with were like in some sort of like PSN call I could just hop into. I think I saw some stuff on TikTok about that. It's like the like friend group when I was like 8 on PS3. It's like a bunch of random people. Like I was a kid and I was like pretty good, so I'd like be playing with these like older people and they're like, "Yeah, we're gonna play." And then I hear like all like the crazy stuff that like goes on in their lives, and I'm just like a little kid just like sitting there. Man, that was crazy. Looking back,
Yeah, it's funny how like those things like, because I kind of had the same thing. I mean, being playing MMOs, like I had, this friend group online, and being able to connect with them on the computer through like an IRC or like Ventrilo or TeamSpeak or something like that was like totally wild at the time. Getting a microphone, was a big deal back then too. They were really expensive, and a lot of people just didn't have them. And like being able to talk online to other people was pretty crazy. But like, yeah, just having that sort of alternate avenue to communicate with people was kind of crazy. And now it's just like kind of weird how both of those things have like kind of disappeared a bit now that, I just think of, I don't know, the spaces back then were like a little more revered. There was always trolls on the internet and always bad actors on the internet, surely. But like, nowadays, there's all this like moderation of stuff. I don't know. It was definitely like more Wild West back then for communication, but I don't know. There was a little bit just more like, it felt like maybe this is just the spaces I was in, a little more like, hey, I can just like jump into like a chat group and like people aren't just gonna like, you know, be assholes, right? Like on the internet or just in communications, right? Because it was kind of like this like, wow, we can like communicate with each other over the internet.
Hmm. Do you guys have you ever seen some of the first cell phones? What they look like, or the ones like the car phones?
I only remember them through Seinfeld.
Yeah. So I haven't seen that episode, but I'm guessing you. Yeah. Yeah. I remember my grandparents going on a long trip, and they wanted, I don't know, maybe it was more of a gadget, but they wanted a car phone, just in case they ran into trouble. And it was a cell phone, but of course it sat, like on the floor of the car in a box, and it had like an antenna that they wired up through the top of the the roof. And but it was an early cell phone, and I think it was like really expensive. It was like so many dollars a minute to call, so you only use it for emergencies, basically. But yeah, I haven't seen that Seinfeld episode, but I'm guessing it's like one of the really big, thick ones with the antenna sticking out the top.
Oh yeah, they look goofy as hell. I think
Yeah.
like I think like Jurassic Park had one too in that movie, and like I remember thinking like it was a radio, not a cell phone. Or yeah, like when I first saw it, I thought it was a radio because of how bulky and goofy it looks. I remember we were going to Wisconsin one time and we rented a car that had a car phone, and I was like, "Oh man, I'm like I've made it big. We're rich now." You know, like that was like a status symbol is a car phone. I remember that.
Yeah, we went to Bosnia. I don't know how we we knew someone. My parents in Bosnia were very poor. We knew someone. They picked us up with like a BMW with a phone in it, but it was like 2009, 2010, and I kind of knew that was like, oh, that's kind of it's neat. It's like a little relic of the past because it was like a dial phone because everyone had cell phones by then. And I was like, oh man, I didn't even know cars like even had that at the time.
I'm kind of curious, Chris. You know, we were talking about um kind of like screen usage and stuff. I guess like do you use your phone like a lot, or is it still like pretty muted, I guess, compared to like me or probably Elmine too? I mean maybe I should ask Elmine too. Like do you use your phone, or is like that not cool anymore either?
Oh yeah, I'm on that thing 24 too much.
I'm glued to it. I'll be honest, I'm glued. I try to, at work, I try to limit it, but I'm pretty much glued to it all the time. I don't even really watch TV really for the most part unless I've got company. I'm just always on my phone.
Yeah, it's really weird. Like yeah, like I will have the TV on. Like I'll have like something I'll call like junk food on in the background, like The Office or something. You know, just like I've
Mm.
seen it a million times, not really paying attention to it. And then I'll be on my phone. And then I'll like be on my laptop too. And it's like it's wild. Like how I it almost feels like, like our collective brains have been hacked or something. It's like everyone needs like constant stimulation. Like there cannot be a single second of non-stimulation. Now it's like wherever I turn there's got to be a screen entertaining me somehow.
Well, that's I teased my 14-year-old about that because that's exactly how he is, because he's continually on 2 screens at the same time. And if he's not, he freaks out because he's like, "Oh, I'm bored, I'm bored, I'm bored. I'm not being stimulated," really. Because yeah, he's got his cell phone and his laptop going all the time. And I'm like, I don't even know how. I mean, as much as I what I told you is true about me always being glued to my phone, I might have the TV on and back for like the background like you said, but I don't think I could focus on a phone doing something and my laptop at the same. I don't think I could do that. My brain's not wired that way. I guess I'm too old, but sounds like you guys do that. Definitely my 14-year-old, he's doing 2 screens at the same time, 2 completely separate things. I don't know how he does it. But yeah, it
When
needs that.
Elmine was our intern, we would like be in a meeting and he would be like playing like he'd be like listening to music and playing a
Ah!
game and like listening to the
In the
meeting
middle of
too. And
our
it's like,
meeting.
Jesus, how is this
Hey,
possible?
I kept up.
Yeah, I know, like
No,
that's the wild
how?
thing. It's just like you're like literally playing like flash games or something and listening to music and paying attention to the meeting. It's just like, damn.
It's that thing where it's like yeah, it's has gotten to the point where it's like I need to be like watching listening to something, and then that gets me to a baseline, and then like okay, now the meeting's happening.
I
Mm.
was gonna ask you, is does your generation like text that much anymore? Is it messaging, or is it like is it like talking through
It's
video now, or
it's
like what?
changing. It's
Okay.
changing. So there's always like the big texting group chats when you have like a lot of people and usually people you're not like too close with, or like it's like a family group chat, right? At least with I know it's either popular to do like a lot of texting or messaging through like Snapchat because that's just kind of what we grew up in middle school with. We have like the most people on that. It was like you give out your Snapchat rather than you give out your phone. And so it used to be like a lot of like quick messages or quick photos with some like text on them. And then the texting feature got big on Snapchat, so there's like some group chats in there. But the biggest thing now is actually like you can like press a button, hold down, and you can just talk. So it's a lot quicker than typing, and you can like people can kind of pick up if you're like being sarcastic or not. So like my group chats nowadays are just a bunch of like voice messages that you like press and like play through. And Snapchat loads them really fast, so it's not like a cumbersome to do that. So yeah, it's just like voice messages now. So like I gotta hold down, record my like message, and then send it through.
Wow.
And if I can't listen to it, they provide a transcript.
That
If I
is
were to make a messaging app, that would be like the core feature, like those things.
Hmm.
that is so. It's just it's funny how like I don't know. I'm perceiving it as like almost circular. You know, it's like we sort of you've like we've just like shortened the feedback loop of like leaving a voicemail message, like to people.
That's true. So getting up back to what we were talking about before, I'm just curious, I mean, so if you don't have one of those devices in front of like if you're ever in a place, maybe this probably doesn't happen often, but if you're ever in a place where you don't have electronic devices in front of you, do you start to feel like antsy? Like, oh my gosh, I'm not getting
Mm.
stimulation. I'm not able to like message anybody or
Oh
yeah.
man, I don't think I've ever said this before, but when I was in early high school, late middle school, like this is when like social media was like really popping, and I was moving to a new school, so I was always like trying to talk to people, and so there was a time where like I would feel like phantom notifications. There was no way there's notification happening, and I would like feel my phone ringing in my pocket. And apparently it was like it's like a thing.
It is. I've had that.
Yeah. So, but now it's gotten better. When I realized I had like ADHD, who knows what caused it? Could have been all that phone stuff, like the parents say. But it's gotten better now. But yeah, it's I would rather have something. But it's also now on TikTok, it's like a thing not to be using your phone. You know, that's cool. You know, you
Oh
gotta
really?
get a phone detox, dopamine detox, stuff like that. Yeah,
Yeah, no, I was
Do you participate in those the detoxes?
I try to. Whether it's like delete social media after the election, I kind of deleted Twitter because I just was over it and moved over to Blue Sky, which have been a lot better. Like
same.
listening to people talk, and then I've kind of been like digging like people's blog posts and stuff. Feels a lot more like higher quality like content I'm consuming, especially about like software engineering stuff. Which I wish that made a comeback. People had like blog posts and like small forum communities.
I
A
can
forum with a few thousand people. Yeah, it's more. I think that's more like fun as a social media site.
Yeah, I've noticed that kind of same trend, I guess, in specifically in tech is like it seems like there's a s- a maybe a slow reversal of away from I don't know. I'm sure the clickbaity stuff will always be there, but I am seeing uh more emphasis on like text, actual like long form text, like the emphasis on blue sky, right? Versus like Twitter, or X or whatever, sort of like a more community driven. It seems like people are maybe pulling themselves back a little bit and being like, "Hey, actually, I yearn for the internet of the 2000s and the 2010s versus the modern, algorithm based feeds."
Yeah, I feel like as like tech people, we kind of understand it's not like we understand the machine behind it, and it's not
Hmm.
like Illuminati controlling our feed. It's more just like this is it optimizes itself and it optimizes on negativity because that's what people like want to see.
Yeah,
So like once we find our own spaces and keep creating these like own spaces, going back to like I don't know, I think it's super cool. Like I even started like a blog site, and I actually have like 3 blog topics I need to write about. Just have yet to get to them, but like I think it's more niche, it's more chic, it's cool.
so on kind of that, if you post a blog and stuff, kind of on that same vein a bit, like, did you ever have any problems, Elmine, with, like because everyone had smartphones and anything like privacy or anything like, people,
Oh yeah,
you know, giving out phone numbers or whatever,
prank calling was a lot more than your days, I assume, because it's like who
Hmm.
you're calling, right? You're not calling the house line.
Right.
I guess I know the refrigerator running joke, but those were relevant because people could like share your phone calls, and we're getting prank called a couple of times, but there was like some websites where you could like put their phone number in or stuff like that, kind of like see who it is sometimes. But one thing that was annoying with privacy wise, like there would always be these accounts, which I don't. Let me know if this has ever happened to you guys, like online or like I don't know email chains. But there are people who make accounts where it's like use like school name, something with school name, Lincoln High, right? Lincoln High couples, and people are like these 2 people should like date, or like Lincoln High, like people would post like horrible, like French gossip blogs, right, about like the school, like these people and stuff. And I don't know, remember that was like kind of annoying because like you'd always like see these people, or sometimes like you'd get posted on it. It would be like, oh my god, you got posted on this with this person. It's like, oh my god. So that was really annoying. But it was never like people portrayed as, at least where I grew up. Like I never really saw physical bullying that much. Maybe more like online bullying, but it was always like indirectly. It wasn't like you're not gonna go post on your own account that like this person sucks. You're gonna go make a second account.
Yeah, I know we talked about this a little bit in another episode, but yeah, it was very like, back in my day, it was like, you basically like left school and like that was it. Like disconnect, right? Like there was no you were private beyond that unless, unless you gave someone an actual phone call, right? There was none of that social media to kind of keep, all the privacy and security stuff. Just like that just wasn't a problem that existed back then, because like you said, you'd call the house and it's like, well, if some asshole like kid calls your house and like gets your parents, then like they could actually get in trouble, like then my
Hmm.
parents would like call the school and be like, this kid's, actually harassing, right? So like
Hmm.
there was immediate repercussions for trying to extend your reach beyond the school at all.
Right.
Chris, do you still text mostly other than Blue Sky?
Yeah. And I guess old people like me, we still use Facebook a lot, but yeah, just mostly text. Yeah.
Yeah, I'm like somewhere in the middle. It's like I text sometimes, mostly like with like my parents. Like we have like group chats like for my family, but like otherwise, like I talk to y'all like on Slack and you know all these
Hmm.
other disparate tools. I don't really use Facebook that much. I still have an account. I was actually contemplating deleting it, but yeah, I still have an account again to keep track of the fam, and that's basically it there.
Yeah, it's interesting. Getting a little off topic, but Facebook, it's interesting how it's kind of morphed from what was like for college kids, and now it's like I think a lot of the people are using are Gen Xers probably or older.
Yeah,
It's like
yeah. I don't even use Facebook. I had it when I was like a kid, but that's about it.
yeah, that's how I keep up to with the people from my high school or college or whatever. That's how we keep in touch. So
Yeah, I remember. I mean, at Facebook for a minute, at least in my social group, like that was kind of the primary like connector tool for a bit. It was we moved past texting. Like the internet started getting pretty big. Into mid 2000s, and it was sort of like a unifying place to bring like the people you were texting and the people you were IRCing, or
hmm.
AOL and MSN. It was kind of like all of these like sort of like the next evolution of like all of these things and brought all of those folks together. And then you're kind of chatting through Facebook there in the late 2000s, at least for me. So
Hmm. Yeah, I agree with that.